Could get your attention. We're going to begin our morning session here. I am Chris. If I have yet to meet you, I serve here as the lead pastor. I see about half of the faces are familiar to me and about half of the faces are rather new to me, which is absolutely wonderful. In some way, shape, or form, you're either here because you want to receive excellent teaching, maybe specifically teaching on the subject matter of Israel, as we have an expert in the house. But it's also likely in some way, shape, or form that you are interested in going to Israel with us, or you've already gone to Israel with us, or you've gone to Israel with New Life, just immediately north of us. All of us have now gone to Israel with Dr. Randy Smith. And so we are delighted that Dr. Randy and his bride Dottie are with us. Hello, Dottie. We're grateful to have you. This is the first time they've ever been to Seattle. So they have traveled the globe, but this is a first, and I thought, well, how wonderful that they get to experience it with us. When I asked them their initial thoughts on Seattle, they said, it's very interesting. That's what they said. So I thought, very good. Let's continue to make it somewhat spicy for them, shall we? Okay. So pull out your phone. Would you do this? Because I want you to be aware of resources from Dr. Randy and those that he serves that will go well beyond just our times with him this weekend. 3 today, 3 tomorrow in our normally scheduled services. And the first is randalldsmith.com. And that will take you to what's called the Wandering Shepherd website. randalldsmith.com. You have tons of articles, tons of videos on many subjects, and that will be of great strength to you. I strongly recommend that I have it saved as a favorites on my Google. So go ahead and mark that. But then also you'll want to type in 1hour1book.com. The one is a number. So 1hour1book.com. And that'll actually take you to a page where Dr. Randy teaches through every book of the Bible within an hour. And they are excellent overviews. In fact, my parents and I were on the same Bible reading plan. They're in Idaho, I'm here. And so we read through the Bible together every year and talk about it. And so we are in Judges in the Old Testament right now. And so they watched Randy's introduction to Judges and they were like, wow, that was good. And I said, I know. Come to Israel with me, right? That's what I'm telling my parents. So all just to say, we're delighted that Dr. Randy and Dottie are here with us. A warm welcome to Mill Creek, Foursquare, and Seattle. We have scheduled for today 3 sessions, 10 a.m., 2 p.m., 6 p.m. They're all scheduled to go somewhere around 2 hours, okay? We have snacks available to you. So here's the rules. You don't have to apologize for getting up during these 2-hour sessions to use the bathroom or to right now we have croissants, orange juice, bottles of water. They're immediately outside these doors. You're welcome to go and grab them at any time. It's not rude, okay? It's just like we're a family, and we get up and we're eating together, and if we have to use the restroom, we use the restroom. So go for it, okay? Don't worry about that. We're not taking a break during these sessions. We're just plowing through. So please know that. Today, this first session, Dr. Andy's just going to introduce us to some topics and walk with us through them. This afternoon is going to be the heaviest on the Bible. He's going to be walking us through the message in the book of Galatians. And this evening's session is going to be really focused on, of course, Scripture, but how Scripture informs present realities, present dynamics in life and culture. So please just know that. And again, for any who are here as a guest, you're welcome to join us in all of the sessions today, for any of our services tomorrow. But also, some are watching us online right now. We have live stream. All 6 sessions with Dr. Randy will be live streamed, so we welcome you as well. And with that said, if you don't know Dr. Randy, he presently serves as the senior pastor of a church in Florida. At the same time, he heads Christian travel study groups that are in Israel and Italy, about half the year? About half the year. He's here, there, and everywhere, and he does it all with grace and may just well be the best in-depth teacher of Scripture I personally have encountered. I respect him greatly. I've learned a great deal from him, and I am stationing myself as someone who will continue to learn from him. As such, I wanted to bring the family, the church that I serve, together with him and just to be able to receive from him. So this is abnormal for us. We don't just usually do teaching seminars on Saturday. But Dr. Randy is of such a caliber that it gives us such an opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic off to him. So would you welcome with me Dr. Randy Smith?
Wow. I really am, there's a certain sense in which we came and found home here, and I'll tell you why. This place runs on caffeine, and so do we. So it's really been a marvelous experience. We've sampled coffees in various places. We've got some we really especially like, and it really is a neat thing to just look at and go walking around a city and try and figure out what's going on in the life of that city. It's been a lot of fun. I'm going to ask if you'll let me to put my mind and body in the same place. Let's have a word of prayer. Lord, we are so thankful for your love, and we're thankful for your grace and your mercy because we need it. We know ourselves. We know all of the issues that we bring to life. And it seems like, at least for me, Lord, it seems like I'm better at picking out what's wrong than what's right, what I'm uncomfortable with, much more than the many incredible blessings you pour out on my life. And so we want to stop at the beginning and just say thank you for what you do. Lord, it seems like we spend a lot more time asking you for things than thanking you for things. And so we want to start our sessions together thanking you for all that you've done. Lord Jesus, for what you did on our behalf at the cross. Father, for giving us your word, because there is a world out there struggling desperately to find answers, and they don't realize that their Creator has already given those answers, and that you desire a relationship with us, and we don't know why because we know ourselves, but that's what your word teaches. You love us. You want us. And so as we talk today, I pray that you would be very present in this place, that what we say would be a reflection of your heart, and that it would reflect your word properly. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, thanks for being with us. I wanted to take a moment and walk you into a subject. The subjects that we're going to be dealing with in the 6 sessions that we're going to be together deal with, obviously, God's heart for the Jewish people and for Israel and what that means. And sometimes when I introduce that subject, there are people who call me an Israel guy. I'm not. I'm a Bible guy. Honestly, if the Bible was set in Zimbabwe, I'd be a Zimbabwe guy. It's about the book. It's about the text. And I fell into love with the people because of the text. I didn't know that I would absolutely be fanatically in love with the Jewish people. I didn't know that I would go to an Arab wedding and have such a wonderful time that I would be fascinated by Middle Eastern culture. I didn't know that was going to happen. I also didn't know about the pain that goes with my part of the world. If I would have known that my dearest friends would be like, if you have friends who went through a divorce and you like both of them but they don't like each other, then you pretty much understand Jerusalem pretty well. It's a lot of people who all have passion about what they believe and think, but they don't necessarily communicate one with another at the level that I would want them to. If you have a Bible with you, or if not a phone, would you go to Ephesians chapter 4 for just a minute? Because I'm uncomfortable doing any subject of any kind without Bible verses. Let me say that this session really is designed to do 3 things. The first one is I want to give you a basic introduction to what the Bible is all about. And I don't want to insult your intelligence because many of you could do a killer job at telling us what the Bible's all about. But what I really want to do is not assume that someone's walking in with that background. We live in a multicultural milieu, and there are a lot of people that are interested in what our story is, but they don't know what our story is. And the Bible has become like Shakespeare. Everybody quotes from it, nobody reads it. Everybody acts like people should know, but they don't know. And so I want to give just an encapsulated view of what the Bible's about. The second thing I want to do is have a brief discussion of why knowing the Bible is essential as a Jesus follower. We are living in a day, and let me see if I can frame it this way. all of the moral issues of our day will be decided by believers in one of two ways. Either you will have a biblical view, understanding the word as the Creator gave it, and then make your statements of what's right and what's wrong based on that view, or you will cobble together a morality based on lots of things you feel strongly about, and then instead of God judging you in His Word, you'll judge God. You'll decide whether or not He should feel the way He does. And many believers that I'm listening to today seem to be talking about the Bible they wish God wrote, not the one He did write. And I think it's because He comes off badly when you didn't start with Him and move to life. Don't start with life and move to Him because you won't understand it. There are essentially two major cosmogonies. Cosmology is a study of how things work in the cosmos. Cosmogony is how we got here. And despite all of the numbers of religions and philosophical streams out there, it really comes down to two boxes. Either somebody created it or somebody didn't. Either there was a design and a designer, or there was happenstance and you are an altered virus with no meaning in a world going nowhere. And those are your choices. And I'm going to side on one side of this unapologetically and tell you why. But I'm going to be very understanding to people whose main emphasis in life has to be composting. Because this is all they have. This world is not my home. This is not who I am. This is just where I live right now. This will fail, but who I am will never die. So says Jesus. So I want to talk about what the Bible's all about. Second thing I want to do is talk about why it's essential to know it. The third thing I want to do is capsulize the narrative as one story, if I can. Now, before we dig in, I want you to go to Ephesians 4. And if you were looking at Ephesians as a book, I would cut it in three parts. Chapters 1, 2, and 3, I would talk about the call of the believer. That is, what does it mean for God to call you and to call you into a relationship in the same way that I called my wife into a relationship? Actually, it really worked the other way around. I was really a late bloomer and didn't really know what was happening. But at any rate, you got the idea, okay? So the call of a believer in 1, 2, and 3. Then chapter 4, verse 1 to chapter 6, verse 9 is a section that I would call the conduct of a believer. And that's, how do I walk? And you're going to see that 5 times the word walk is used in that section. And we'll mark them out for you in just a minute. The third section is the conflict of a believer, and that's the part many believers know in chapter 6, verses 10 to 20, because that's the part that deals with the armor of God and the conflict. Here's the truth. Cut it all the way to the bottom, and Paul said, God called you. God knows what He wants you to behave like, not to earn a relationship, but because you have one. And by the way, you were born again into a war. So armor up. That's Ephesians. Now, look for a moment at 4:1. Do you see? It says, therefore, I, the prisoner of the Lord, implore you to walk. There it is. There's my word. Walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you have been called. So I see that I'm to walk worthy of the price paid for me. But if I skip down a little bit, I go down to 4:17, I'm going to see that word again. So this I say, affirm together with the Lord that you, there it is, walk no longer as Gentiles also walk in the futility of their mind. That is, I'm not only supposed to walk worthy, I'm supposed to walk distinctly. So it should be clear in our minds that Jesus paid a great deal for us. If we know Jesus as our Savior, He paid a great deal for us, and I want to walk in conjunction with the price paid for me. I mean, you've done this. You go out, you pick an expensive automobile, and if you go out on the lot and you open the door and the handle comes off in your hand, it's over. The salesman can do whatever he wants. It's over because the handle came off in my hand. This isn't worthy of what you want me to pay for it, and I'm not going to buy it. But not only that, 4:17 tells me I'm to walk in a distinct pattern. That means There is no such thing in the Bible as Christianus Incognitus. There's no secret Christian. No one's going to show up at the judgment. Surprise! I really was one. No, you really weren't. If you have a T-shirt that declares you're a Christian and you need a T-shirt to declare you're a Christian, you're probably not. Okay? Because your lifestyle needs to declare it in a distinct walk. Drop down to 5:2 for a minute. I'm just marking out my walks. In 5:2 it says, 5:1, therefore be imitators of God, mimitai or mimics of God, as beloved children. And there it's my word, walk in love, just as Christ also loved you and gave himself for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God. So there's a third walk, and it's characterized by love. So I'm a distinctive lover who desires to walk according to what Jesus paid for me. That's what I got so far. Drop down just a little bit further, and you'll go down and see in 5:7 says, therefore do not be partakers with them, for you were formerly darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. There's my word, walk. So I'm supposed to be somebody who's distinctive, who's a lover of people, who walks in a way that isn't hiding, shaded, concealing, but is open, is honest, is loving, and desires that my Lord's price paid for me would be reflected in how carefully I handle the life that he's given me. I've got one more. Get down to verse 15. Chapter 5, verse 15 says, therefore be careful how you walk. And you say, Paul, you've been telling me now for 4 different walks how to walk. Of course I'm going to be careful. And it says, don't walk as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time, because the days are evil. It sounds so ominous, the days are evil. Here's what he's really saying. Time isn't on your side. I'm going to have to choose more than anything else about your life, more than your pedigree, more than your past, more than your personality, the thing that will most characterize whether or not you will become what God wants you to become are your choices. Time is ticking away. And I looked in the mirror the other day and saw my dad. I don't know how that happened. Has that happened to anybody else in the room? Not my dad, but your dad. Your mom, okay? If you saw my dad, we all have a problem, okay? But no, what I'm trying to say is very simple. Now, I want you to zero in on, go back to that one of walking distinctly, 4:17, because I skipped by it, but I mean it for a very specific statement. Ephesians 5:14 says, as a result of God sending us gifted trainers like apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers that he just said, we are no longer to be children, tossed here and there by the waves, carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, by craftiness and deceitful scheming. But speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in all aspects into him who is the head, even Christ, from whom the whole body being fitted and held together by what every joint supplies according to the proper working of each individual part causes the growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. I want you to look very closely, because he says he's picking out how we live differently. Because telling me to be distinct just says be weird. We got a lot of Americans that got that line already. Be weird. They already got that. They know how to do that. But here's what it says. If I'm going to live differently, I'm not going to live like children. I'm not going to be carried by the forces around me, tricked by people who are crafty, or duped by people who are schemers. Rather, here's what I'm going to do. When I speak, I'm going to speak in love. When I walk out into the body, I'm going to grow toward Jesus as the head. What does that mean? That means he gets to decide what's right and wrong, not me. See, the head, did you ever meet somebody whose limbs aren't in connection with their head? It's not pretty, is it? The beauty of the body is when the head is flowing and giving the instructions. But I live in the 21st century church in America where the head seems to be detached from a lot of the way the instruction is coming out. Because the arm is worried about looking like arms that aren't arms of Jesus. The feet are worried about being able to go where everybody else goes, not distinctiveness. So it says that I'm going to understand the right of the Creator to define everything. He's the one who did it. If you have problems with the opening chapters of Genesis, you have problems with the rest of the Bible. But if in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth and he said it's good and he said it's for what he made it for, then that defines everything. I'm not misunderstanding why our world doesn't buy that. As soon as you dismiss the first line, you dismissed all the ethical premise of a lot of things that we believe. Now, the proper thing, though, that I wanted you to see is, did you notice in verse 16 it says that if I am in fact living distinctly, the proper function of the body will come from the proper commitment to the head, and the body will work together. I'm living in a time where there's a lot of believers who think I can pull off my walk with Jesus on my own. The problem is there's way too many one another's. There's just way too many one another's in the book. You're not going to be able to pull off any of those in a room by yourself or out on a golf course worshiping God in nature. Because most people aren't worshiping God out there. They're playing golf and you're in their way. So God called the church to be a place where believers do three things. The first one is be committed to the head. Don't miss that, because a lot of people are missing that. They're thinking, I go to church and I feel so good. I'm so connected to people. That's not the main point. The main point is I'm first connected to the head. The second thing that happens is I'm interconnected to each other because we're all connected to the head. And the head decides what's right and what we're doing. And the third thing I do is I look at what the head is instructing me to understand based on all of the nerve statements of the Word of God. Without God's Word, I'm looking through a glass darkly, and all I can see is a dark world. But with His Word, He defines everything about everything. Let me give you an example. When God looks at this room, He sees two kinds of people, not male and female. When God looks at the room, He sees people who know Him and people who need to. That's it. Everything else is secondary. So before I bring my politics, before I bring my arguments, before I bring all my other stuff, my first statement is, does this person know God or do they need to? Because as His representative, that's going to be really important for me to decide. Now, fed by the Word and submitted to Him, I'm going to lock arms with other believers, and I'm going to use the Word to define the world. The word for that is faith. I use the word for faith, God glasses, okay? So the word is, I look through the word to see the world as God says it is. That's faith. The ability to see it the way God said it is. And having done that, you know what? It occurs to me that not everybody fits into the mold of the world already. And maybe we could learn from them. It was in the mid-'80s that the Special Olympics came to Seattle. True story. There were 9 runners that were running in this particular race. Just after they shot the gun of the starting, which they no longer do but did back then, the runners began to run. And after the first turn, a young gal in the third lane fell down. She skinned both of her knees and skinned her nose. She sat down on the track and she cried. All the other runners stopped. They turned around, they walked back, they picked up the girl, this is true, and walked her all the way around the rest of the race, and they all finished together. The crowd went nuts. It was on its feet, yelling and screaming. See, they thought they won because they measured winning differently. It's time for the church to actually measure winning differently. It's not about us getting our guy in the White House or our guy or gal in the Supreme Court. The win is when people properly see Jesus reflected in us in a way that makes them thirsty for a relationship with God. Let me throw a proposition out to you, and I'll come back to what we're trying to do. That God provided something very unique for us to use to reach a lost world. He didn't give us a job and then not give us a way to do it. What he gave us was over a 1,050-year period of 1,500 years, the writing of more than 40 authors that are combined into essentially one idea, one story, the story of the Bible. And what's interesting is some of them were scribes, some were scholars, some were statesmen, some were slaves, some of them were shepherds, some of them were seers, but all of them were telling one story. I want to talk about what that story is, but here's what I need you to know. The evidence for your Bible is more solidly preserved than anything in the ancient Western canon of any book anywhere. There is nothing more attested. My background in forensic archaeology, there is nothing more attested than the New Testament writings, than the Hebrew Scriptures writings of what some call the Old Testament. And basically, if you opened up the first 12 chapters of Genesis, here's what you'd learn. There are 5 storylines to the Bible, okay? The opening is God, who he is, what he cares about. Right after that, though, there's another introduced character, the enemy. We'll just call him the adversary, Satan. Who he is, how he works. Then there's another one, the mutiny. What happened when the adversary snuck into the garden and got the 2 in the garden to join in the mutiny against God? Then, why are things broke? The human condition. Why does my body get older? Why can I see less than I could see before? Why do relationships fall apart and families fall apart? What is wrong with the human condition? And then it finishes with a story of the restoration and redemption of mankind. And the end of the Bible is as perfect as the beginning. New garden, new heavens, new earth, reset button. Now, I want you to notice something about those 5 storylines. Whenever I'm in the human condition and I become self-sufficient, I go backwards toward mutiny. But whenever I'm in the human condition and I surrender to God, I go toward redemption and restoration. So I'm sitting in the human condition with 2 directions I can go. And it's counterintuitive to say the one who surrenders wins. But here's what I want to tell you the Bible says. The one who surrenders wins. What's the symbol of our Christian faith? A cross. What does that tell you? The one who surrenders wins. It's totally counterintuitive. Everybody in the world wants to see strength and model strength, and you need to be more powerful, and don't you understand? The world will walk all over you. But you have to remember that he who gives his all to the one who made him becomes exactly what he was created to be. Now, there's a second question I want to ask, and that is, what's the big deal about knowing the Word? I mean, after all, it's great, I'm glad, but I grew up in a place in New Jersey where basically if you had your truth, that's fine, it works for you, I'm for whatever gets you through the night, that kind of live and let live kind of thing. So what's the big deal? Why are you walking around the country trying to tell Christians they need to know what's in the Bible? But I think we need to face the fact that there is both an attack on the Bible and there's an erosion in our own ranks as to how much we know of it. Let me just quiz you, but don't raise your hand, don't point, don't feel anything, just respond mentally. There are 48 chapters in Ezekiel. How much do you know about the man? What's the second half, and how is it different than the first half? Why is Haggai important? He's dust and gone. Habakkuk, what's that all about? Aside from cherry picking from Isaiah for Christmas cards, what's the rest of the book about? Let me say it this way. There are 1,189 chapters in the Scriptures. And my job during the year is I go away and I teach on location, and then I come back and I'm in a room full of 20-year-olds. I take 20-year-olds, put them in a dorm in Florida, and I walk them through 1,189 chapters in 10 months. And when I'm done, I go to Italy and eat pasta because it makes everything better. Now, here's the important thing. The important thing is, if that's the irreducible minimum God gave you, what part don't you need? Because a lot of us have already considered the fact that we could be a believer for 50 years and not have to learn most of the book. So what we're actually saying is you don't really need all that. You can skip all that stuff and get to the good stuff. But you and I know what it means to live life based entirely on eating dessert. It's obvious that I know that, and some of you know that as well. So we're obviously going to have to learn the other stuff that comes before dessert that's pretty important to our body. So there are two critical foundational truths I want you to think about and as we go through this weekend. First of all, it is perfectly reasonable for you to believe the record of the Scripture, and I will defend that in questions and answers. I will do what I can. I'm going to tell you that there is no reason for you to hang your head down and go, well, we believe the Bible, as if it's some secondary source. It is better attested than anything out there. You cannot take history and pull it back in the Quran or in Gautama, the Buddha. You can't do it necessarily in Confucianism. All of those patterns that exist have good moral statements, or maybe not, but some of them have good moral statements, but you can't relate them to history. The Bible has cross-checkable history. The second thing I want you to know is when you employ a mixture of disciplines, archaeology, history, geography, geology, anthropology, ancient cultural study, sociology, the story becomes more compelling, not less compelling. So that's what we want to do. Now, I'm going to read you something from Daniel Wallace because I found that it helped when I was facing, kind of putting my mind around, why are we facing a time with a wall of cynics in education being met by a deeply weakened church? Why is this happening? We have smart people in Christianity. So why are we coming off so doltish? Daniel B. Wallace offered this insight. He said, those in ministry must close the gap between the church and the academy. We have to educate believers. Instead of trying to insulate or to isolate lay people from critical scholarship, we need to insulate them by explaining it. They need to be ready for the barrage because it is coming. Intentional dumbing down of the church for the sake of filling more pews will ultimately lead to the defection from Christ. We need more than a mile wide and inch deep. We're going to need more than that. Now, increasingly in our culture, the Bible has been not so subtly attacked. You want to know who Jesus was? Ask Reza Aslan on CNN. Because if you want to know, obviously someone who never surrendered his heart to him, never really studied him, and came up through a different faith entirely is the perfect person to introduce Jesus to you. The Da Vinci Code, other movies, TV shows, have tried to make the argument that the Bible is not reliable translation. It's an effort of control. Church political control. It's interesting, when everybody else wants to be politically in control, that's okay, but if we want anything that has to do with politics, it's somehow seedy, right? A few years ago, Peter Jennings, when he was working for ABC, told an unrecognizable story of Jesus in his series, The Search for Jesus, which has now been picked up by CNN and altered, and you can now get Morgan Freeman or Reza Aslan to tell you the updated version. But here's the thing. Peter Jennings, when he was done, ended up with Jesus being a Jewish cynic who actually was born in Nazareth, not in Bethlehem, and dogs ate him off the cross. And here's the thing. These alternative theories, here's what they do. They cut 5 people and they have them stand in front of books and have it cut in like they're somehow experts in their field because they own books. Or maybe they're rented, who knows? We live at a time now where the only expertise you need to have an international voice is an internet connection. You don't have to know anything, you just have to be able to put words together and have an internet connection. National Geographic challenged the objective reality of the historicity of the New Testament. Over and over, the secular world gives you the impression that the Bible's somehow missing parts, or that really those parts at Nag Hammadi, Egypt, where Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene, maybe they're equally authentic. Now, here's the thing. There's nobody in the scholarly world that actually believes that. Why did they go on camera and say it? Have you seen the paychecks that go to professors recently? Because I got to tell you, the media pays a lot more than the college. So there's a good reason why they're doing what they do. Popularly marketed books such as The Orthodox Corruption of Scripture or Lost Christianities. Professor Bart Ehrman, who's University of North Carolina, you will find he used to be among evangelical students in 2 of our evangelical schools, and then he went off to basically criticize that how we got the Bible is completely and entirely false. It's interesting because if you actually deal with people like this, you find, first of all, they say things they know aren't true. I was on a cruise ship, and I was playing the part of the Apostle Paul. We had the University of Thessaloniki, the chair of the Aristotle chair of philosophy, and he was playing Why I'd Rather Be a Pagan. And we had a number of different lectures that we had to give in front of people, and I was playing things of the Apostle Paul because we were in Greece, and it was all about that region of the world. And this man was, in his lectures, outlining why paganism actually was a superior form of life over Christianity. I had to borrow a tie because I didn't have a tie with me, and so I was looking for the guy to give his tie back, and I walked out onto the deck on the outside of the ship after one of the lectures, and standing there was this professor of philosophy, and he's standing there, and he looked at me, and he said, "I want you to know something. I'm miserable, and I'm on my 3rd marriage." Now, I thought that was a rather unusual thing to just tell me, but I recognized that he had been drinking for a while. And so I walked up to the rail, and I said, "Well, tell me about that. Because you just finished a couple hours of telling people that paganism as a construct is a much better way to live. I'm still with the wife of my youth, having a good time." And he's looking at me. I think one of the things we have to understand, and I don't know another way to say this, walking around Seattle was helpful for me yesterday. There are a lot of people who are living a lie. They honestly believe that sleeping around is going to make them happy. It's not. It's going to use up their body. And one day, when they realize there's nothing in what they've been living for, where are they going to go? So one of my calls to the church is to become the place that gets them in from the cold. Because it's cold out there, and people are lying to each other about what the answer to life is. And if you know Jesus, you already know what it is. I'm not worried about you because, the guy who's driving the Rolls Royce isn't looking at the Ford next door. I'm not worried about you. I'm more concerned that we are looking at this world and framing our victories in this world. Their life is going to be empty. If Jesus is true, what they're saying won't work. You can't rebuild the family other than the way God did, and it's going to work just fine. It's not. But rather than shake my finger at them, I want them to know, first of all, there's a God who loves you, and when you're done flailing around down there, he'll be happy to talk to you. Got to tell you, archaeology is one of the disciplines that I use to look at the Bible. My feet have been every place that Paul was, every place that Jesus was. I used to walk the Sinai back and forth. I know the curves in the road, and I've stood in front of the camels, and here's what I can tell you. The disciplines that are used to decide the veracity of an ancient text. How do we know it's true? Well, in one case, I remember when people used to say, well, Moses couldn't have written the Torah because, after all, it was an illiterate culture. 50 years later, they were saying, wow, you could choke a mule on how much these people were writing. They were writing constantly. I remember when people used to say there was no such thing as the Hittites. It was a made-up group in the Bible until Hattusis was discovered. Guess what? It was one of the most modern cities of its ancient period and had incredible size to it. We don't even know the full size of a Hattusis today because there's a whole part of it that hasn't even been excavated at all. I remember there's a guy in Acts 13. Paul goes and stands in front of a guy, Sergius Paulus. And I remember, I have on my shelf, in fact, a book that says, this man must be a corruption of the text, for no such man was ever recorded in the history of the Roman records. And then in the 20th century, we found the guy's name on a list, and now all of a sudden he's a real person. 1961, Antonia Frova's digging at Caesarea, and he gets to a stone, he flips it over, and on the backside of the stone it says Pontius Pilatus, Pontius Pilate. And they went, hooray, Pilate's a real person. How stupid. He was a real person before he was found on a rock. I mean, really. People would criticize. They'd look at the book of Acts and say the word magistrates as applied to Philippi is the wrong word, until we found it on a sign in Philippi from the first century that said the magistrates are the following, and it names them. 1929, somebody was digging in Corinth, found right in the middle of the street an inscription that says, Erastus, the city treasurer, helped give money to build this street. Now, what's interesting is in Romans 16:23, Erastus is the city treasurer, and up until 1929, it was frequent in the end of the 1800s with critical scholars saying these are obviously made-up names, for there has never been an Erastus uncovered that would be. Until you uncover it and the guy signed a street, what do you want? My point is that what one generation says, you just can't know, we can't really find, the next one digs up. And here's what I can tell you. I'm not telling you that everything's clean in the Bible and we have archaeology for everything. But you have to understand that 90% of the sites haven't even been touched yet. And we're very far into documenting the cross-checkable history of the Bible. If you happen to be like me, somebody who believes that the Bible that you hold has authority and has historical veracity, the ball's rolling towards you, not away from you. 3 years ago, I used to go to Jericho and stand there and go, the oldest wall we have at Jericho is 1,200 to 1,400 years before the time of Joshua. It's now down to 150 years, and all they did was 3 more years of a dig. Why? Because La Sapienza University from Rome, which has no vested interest in proving the Bible whatsoever, very secular people, have said, yeah, we dated this wrong. How did we do that? All I'm trying to get you to see is that there is such an academic bias that if you dig up anything anywhere in the world, you can say great things about it. Unless it's in the Bible, then we're really suspect about the sources and don't really know. It's not this kind of field. It's this kind of field. There's a vested interest in showing that the Bible isn't right. And I come to the conclusion that a lot of it has to do with professors that want to sleep with their students. That if the Bible is true, then there's a morality. If there's a morality, then there's stuff I can't or shouldn't be doing. I really think it's that simple. Why? Because I know guys. That's why. Now, in addition to that, let's go past archaeology. Let's go to historicity. Are there historical reasons why? If these things are true, if Jesus was really here on the planet, wouldn't there be some historical record that somebody who's not got a vested interest in it would tell the story? Well, the problem is, and this is what happens in relationship specifically to the academy, almost all of those documents of the West went through hands of religious academies. Why? Because they're the ones who preserve the libraries. Thereby, academic people today can discount everything written in history that adds to the evidence of the Bible. However, use the exact same sources when it adds to anything else. So, what do I mean? Well, in about the year 55, there was a fellow by the name of Thales who recorded in the 3rd book of his histories that a darkness of an eclipse of the sun fell over Jerusalem at a time syncing with the crucifixion of Jesus. Now, the only record we have of that is from Julius Africanus, who was writing a history of the world, and because he was a 3rd century Christian historian, all of the historians will say, well, you can't use that because it's only through Christian history we know that, so it's tainted. The problem is, so's everything else. What do I do with history that went through the monastery? Do I discount all of it as self-serving because that's where we got the copies? Some of you might be very familiar with the Roman world, and I've worked the last 5 years on a couple of different Roman archaeological and historical narrative writings about the Roman world. And really, in terms of being a 1st century specialist, I would just tell you that Tacitus, Cornelius Tacitus, is considered one of the brighter lights of the ancient Roman world. He wrote the Annals, and in book 15, he says, Christ as a person was executed by Pontius Pilate during Tiberius's reign. Now, he doesn't tell you how he knows that. He just tells you that it happened. But if you went to the Gray Distinguished Professor of Religious Studies at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and listened to Bart Ehrman, he would say, well, that's a controversial statement in the annals because it seems so very Christian. Now, I'm scratching my head and going, anything about Christ is going to sound Christian. Cornelius Tacitus wasn't a Christian, so if he happens to reference something of Jesus, it becomes illegitimate because it's too Christian? I don't... Would you be open to the idea that most of the history statements we have concerning Muhammad were written by Muslim writers? I mean, that's not weird, is it? That's what people write about things they're interested in. Suetonius, who, by the way, is a lesser light, not as good as Tacitus, because Suetonius goes thematically. Some of you understand this. I'm a linear thinker. I'm a Tacitus. I like it when he's born here, goes to school here, lives there, works there, dies there. Story. Suetonius does this kind of breezing through life, kind of like the way some of my friends tell stories, you know. And he went to school here. Oh, by the way, he was born there. Oh, did I happen to mention he married? Oh, and by the way, do you have a friend like that? Okay, Suetonius then becomes one of the lesser lights. And he's at the end of the 1st century, beginning of the 2nd century. And he basically says this. He says, because the Jews at Rome caused constant disturbances at the instigation of one called Chrestus, which means kindness, Claudius expelled them from the city. Then it says, during his reign, many abuses were severely punished and put down. No fewer new laws were made. A limit was set to expenditures. Public banquets were confined to the distribution of food. The sale of any kind of cooked viands and taverns were forbidden. And the exception of pulse and vegetables, whereas before every sort of dainty was exposed for sale. He's talking about a time when they were going through a real tough time food-wise. And then he says this. Punishment was inflicted on the Christians, a class of men given to a new and mischievous superstition. He put an end to the diversion of the chariot drivers, and then he goes on with the other people in town that he messed with. So a long list of people that he had to clean up all the perverse people in society. Do you know what the Christians were accused of? Atheism. The earliest persecution of the Christians were that they were atheists. But you know Christians aren't atheists, so how were they considered atheists? They wouldn't sacrifice to the state gods. So as far as they were considered in terms of their own local community, they were atheists. Some of you know that in 79, in the Bay of Naples, a huge eruption of Mount Vesuvio, or Vesuvius, happened and actually remade the contour of the Bay of Naples. Now, there are 5 cities and 2 farm sites, 7 sites in all, that tell us everything we know from the Roman period because they were buried with the signs still on the wall, men's room. I mean, everything's right exactly the way it was when it's covered over. And when you dig it up, there's the pictures on the wall. There's the fruit in the fruit bowl, now carbonized in the fruit bowl. And so you can see it all as it was. Pliny the Older was a general that was killed in that particular blast. Pliny the Younger writes about it. But later on, he goes on to write other letters. And one of the letters he writes is a letter to Emperor Trajan or Trajan. And he writes a letter about these Christians. All I'm trying to establish is there were other people writing about Christianity, Christ, and Christians. He said this, I interrogated those as to whether or not they were Christians. Those who denied that they were or had been Christians when they invoked the gods in words dictated to me offered prayer with incense and wine to your image, which I ordered to be brought for this purpose together with statues of the gods. And moreover, cursed Christ, something real Christians would not do, he says. He says, others, named by informers, declared that they were Christians, but they denied it. Some would not bow down. They all worshiped your image in that setting, but those others that would not, I knew they would not curse Christ. So here's my question. Is there actual evidence that there was Jesus, that there were early followers, that they were in the time period that they were said to be in the book of Acts, in the New Testament? Sure. Okay. Let me just assume for a minute that you already believe that. I don't know that about you, but let's assume for a minute that you accept the fact that the Bible has a real record of history. Okay? Let's accept that. What's the story about? I want to see if I can create for you in one simple tale what the whole Bible's about. It's really about 2 worlds, 2 marriages, and 2 gardens. It's a romance. It's a story about relationship. And it starts in poetry. You'll find in Ezekiel and Isaiah simple chapters of poetry that are difficult to understand, but it starts with this idea. Long ago, before there was time, God existed. The Bible says he existed and he decided that he was relational and wanted relationship. So he created a world. There were millions upon millions created in this world. It was a world like ours in some ways, but not exactly. We call those beings that he created angels. They were sexless. They were set up in 4 levels: cherubim, seraphim, archangel, angel. And they were all organized much like you and I today would say is like an army. They didn't procreate. They were all created at the same time. They interrelated. They served. They sang. They celebrated. One of them was close to the Creator. And that one decided that he would turn and mutiny against the Creator. Stop. Press the hold button. How could that happen? Perfect place. Perfect beings. Because when the Creator decided to create, he placed the highest value, not on loyalty, on love. And when the highest value was love, here's the problem with the highest value being love. Ask any kid who's trying to ask a girl to a dance. The highest problem, when you put love at the top, there's a risk, right? So combined into the beginning of creation was a God who wanted a relationship that was reciprocal, not automatic. Release the hold button. The cherub decided he would mutiny. He took 1/3 of all those who had been created beings and stood and shook their fist at God. And the other 2/3 that were gathered around the throne said, God, what are you going to do? Look at what Lucifer's doing. Look at how he said, wait. I want to tell a story. God, this is not really a time for a story. There's an insurrection going on. It's my universe, my story. So God whips up and hurls out there 2.0 universe. And this one is the one we're in. It has material properties. It has interrelationship and procreation, things that the original 1.0 didn't have. And the 2/3 who were with God were watching what was going on, going, what are you doing? Wait, I'm telling a story. And he made 1 quintillion stars, and he flung them out into the universe. And he made aardvarks and anteaters and chocolate. Just the very word. And then God created the coffee bean so we could all get started in the morning. And there were all kinds of wonderful things that he created. And then, seriously, 1 little rock, 1/3 from 1 little star. He put a garden on it. He put on there all kinds of things that he liked with texture and color. From our perspective, it's huge. From his, it's tiny. And the angels watched and they said, Father, what are you doing? And he said, I'm telling my story. Then he took a little piece of dirt from the dust of the ground, scraped it together and went, man. And he created from that man a woman. What's interesting about this story is that he doesn't stop the enemy from slithering into the garden. And the angels who are sitting around him become uncomfortable. letting him in. It's my story. I'm telling the story. Watch. In comes the adversary. Out from the garden are expelled the couple because they defied in mutiny against the Creator. Now follow the story. It's true that that beautiful garden began to grow weeds. It's true that from that very moment of the shaking of fist, every rape, every murder, every lie, every horrible thing that would ever happen was unleashed like Pandora's box opening. And the angels were upset, and God said, just watch. I'm telling my story. And he revealed right away a story of redemption. And he took the life of an animal and clothed the couple, expelled them from the garden, and made them a promise. I know, Eve, I know that your husband didn't protect you properly, and I know that you were deceived, but from your womb will come a Savior. Now, mankind went off and began to move into other parts, and people began to have children, and God allowed the fruit of their womb to multiply, and the landscape was multiplying, and because there was going to come from the fruit of that womb a Savior, there's an introduction, a second time, of world 1.0, the angelic world, into world 2.0, the material world. And it says those from the first world, called sons of God, another way of saying spiritual beings, walked among the daughters of men and began to infect them, to degrade the society. And God waited, like he always does, until there was one last family that was clean. And a man by the name of Noah, his name means comfort, a man of clean blood, he sequestered him to build an ark. And he saved mankind through the clean blood of one after an attack against the race was going to destroy his ability to redeem it. But he wasn't done. From time to time, I get people in colleges that'll say to me, well, according to your belief, that means that some people who are out there in the bush who maybe never heard the message and they die without Christ, they're lost. And I say to them the same thing. It is not as though everyone didn't get off the ark and know God was serious about sin. At one point, everybody on the planet knew. If somebody decided not to tell their kids, that's not God's fault. But everybody knew getting off the ark, God's really serious about sin. Then, it says that the Lord looked out at the landscape and saw that the people were trying to gang up and to build a monument to themselves. And so he divided them by family and by nation and by language, and he spread them out. And then he chose of the nations one nation that would be his special beloved wife. The Father in heaven said, there they are, that's my people. They weren't better looking. And if you read their book, they weren't more reliable. And in fact, when God told Abraham that it would come from his loins through Isaac, he said, how about Ishmael? Because I think that would work better. So in the story, God chose a wife. I'm plagiarizing Revelation 12 and Hosea, is what I'm doing right now. He chose a wife, and he said, this wife will be my wife. Here's the problem with this particular wife. That wife, Israel, was not a good wife. In fact, she went around with all sorts of other suitors. She was begging others. And she was degrading and defacing. It was a demoralizing situation. And God said, all right, I'm going to need to put you away. But not until they had a son. The Father in heaven and one of the daughters of Israel had a son. And that son was told to now choose a bride. But not of one nation, of many nations. Not of one color or ethnicity, of many ethnicities. And when he was told to choose that bride, he began choosing. And the Father said, now that you've chosen a bride, here's what I want you to do. Even before the wedding, I want that chosen bride of yours, that engaged of yours, to teach my estranged wife what it means to be a wife. I want her to feel the jealousy of understanding what she's giving up. Someday soon, according to the Bible, a trumpet sounds, and the wedding feast is declared, and the son gets his bride and receives her into his home. And simultaneously with that, somebody was not invited to the wedding. The woman, the estranged wife. What is she doing? She's still looking for someone to love her. And so God turns his attention onto the earth and shows her graphically through a time of terrible Jacob's trouble. She's running from one to another to find love. Nobody loves her. And finally, her back is to the sea. She cannot escape. The nations around her are angry with her. They want to drive her into the sea. And she looks up, and there is the one who is the Son coming with his bride, with King of Kings and Lord of Lords written on his thigh. And he comes, and when he breaks through, he saves her. And then God remakes everything. And that's the end of the story. That's the Bible. 2 marriages, a garden broken in the beginning, restored in the end. A universe inside of a universe. But wait, what's written on the head of every single believer at the end of Revelation? Do you remember? Written across their forehead is the divine name, which means I am. Because I become a trophy of the grace of God, and the angels all across the cosmos will see it, and he will say, this is who I am, not who the enemy told you I was. So my life, your life, the entire story of the church, the entire story of Israel, all of those stories are to say one thing: this is who I am, signed God in blood. It's signed in blood. And the story is to get you to move to the place where you understand who God is. Now, what we just did was a dance through lots of different scripture. I want to just share with you, if you have a Bible, there is a mistake in your Bible. There's a mistake. I'll tell you exactly where it is. In the very beginning of your Bible, you have a page that was inserted there. It's not a part of the original collection of the books. It says the word Old Testament. And then 2/3 of the way through, there's another page, somebody inserted it. It says New Testament. Now, they got it because of a monk who was reading in Hebrews chapter 8, and he thought the old covenant that was done away with was actually the first 39 books of the Bible. And it was replaced by a new covenant, which is new books of the Bible. But if you read Hebrews 8, it has nothing to do with books at all. It has to do with an access agreement to God, not where he wrote things down. So you and I, in Christian churches from all over, were quietly, subtly trained that the first 2/3 of the book is old stuff for dead Jews, and the last third of the book is new stuff for Christians who live on the west coast of the U.S. Now, here's my problem. You are no more a Corinthian or a Colossian or a first century Roman than you are an ancient Jew in the desert. So I'm going to suggest to you that what happens is people walk around trying to grab from the text of the Bible and shove it into modern problems, when here's the problem: it's not written to you, but it's all written for you. You're reading someone else's mail, but it's still your creator. It's still your father, but it's written to somebody else. I came from a big family. My parents took foster children my whole growing up years. Even before I was born, they took foster children. There were 6 biologicals, 4 adopted, and the rest we used to call rentals when I was growing up. terrible, terrible. We're rotten kids. You should never let your kids be like us. And anyway, so we had all these kids, and the nice part was if we visited your church, your attendance went up by 10%, you know. My father had an Econoline panel van with no windows, with red lead painted on the bottom. This will just kind of evoke some memories. Some of you are going, what's red lead? Oh, you're just too young. At any rate, my father then would pull up outside the church, and the back doors would open, and we'd look like SWAT getting out with our Bibles, one after the other, after the other, after the other. Now, what was interesting is that growing up in that setting, my parents, I don't know what happened to them. You try to raise good parents. My parents had different rules for different age groups. Were you subjected to this kind of abuse? My older brother had a later curfew than mine. Is that not just wrong on the face of it? I mean, seriously. I'm obviously a more reliable guy. So here's the thing. I had to learn from watching my older brother interact with my parents what my parents cared about. My son came in. I have 3 children. I have 2 incredible, beautiful girls, and I have a son. He's wonderful. We actually have a great time. A beautiful son. Here's the thing. Years ago, my girls, when I would say clean a room, meaning when I would say, I mean, it sounds just like their mother's voice. When she would say, clean your room, the girls would go in and clean the room. Aaron didn't really believe in clean. And he would get frustrated. My wife would come home, and I always knew it was going to be trouble when she said, your son. I knew it was going to be trouble. So I sat down with him on the edge of his bed one day, and I said, son, look, your mother she's very frustrated because you're not cleaning your room. And he said, why would I? She will. Now, first of all, I gave him points for being honest, okay? Second, he was right. I'm looking around this room, and I said, son, the room's not even dirty. Yeah, I know, Mom was here. So now I'm trying to be like, good husband. So I sit down with her. No, honey, if you're going to clean the room. If I don't clean the room, it's not going to get cleaned. Yeah, but it's not going to get cleaned if by him, if you clean the room. So I'm doing this kind of, sliding between people. So I sit down with my son, and I said to him, son, I think you're missing the point. I don't really care how clean your room is, but I want you to be a stand-up guy who has a good job, who takes care of his family. He goes, okay. I said, well, here's my problem. In order to do that, you're going to have to go to work, right? Yeah. In order to do that, you're going to have to, take your car, right? Yeah. In order to do that, you're going to have to be able to find your keys, right? Yeah. That's why I want you to clean your room. I got a bigger agenda here than the one you're thinking about. I don't care if there's dust on your mantle. I care that you're going to be a stand-up guy and do what you're supposed to do. Now, why am I telling you that? Because in the Bible, the first 2/3 of the Bible tell you a story about an estranged bride of the Father that he will take back. There's a divorce, but there's a rejoining coming. And I'm watching the story of a failed marriage so that I can learn how to have a good one. And what I'm doing, looking into the scriptures, looking at other people's rules. I don't have to kill a goat to make God happy. I just need to know why he cared. I want to know why he told them to do it. What are the timeless truths and principles of a changeless God? Because that's going to matter. Now, my problem is the Bible's not divided by Old and New Testament. You see, the fact of the matter is 2 Timothy 3:16 says all scripture is God-breathed. It's profitable for doctrine, for reproof and instruction in righteousness. The man of God may be adequate and equipped for every good work. Now, that's either true or it's not. I'm going to propose it because it's on the face of it in God's word. It's true. And if I say it's true, then what I'm saying is that Leviticus and Colossians are equally part of what God gave me to build a standard of the principles, timeless, of a changeless God. And that's why I need it all scripture. And when that was written, most of the New Testament wasn't yet in existence. So here's my point. We have quietly learned to lop off big pieces that we don't think we really need because it's old stuff for dead Jews. And for everything that we have learned not to pay attention to, what we've done is lost some principle. Let me offer this. Throughout the scriptures, there are 7 types of literature in the Bible. This is not riveting stuff. It's not really scintillating stuff, but it's important. If you take the things that the scriptures are made up of, there are 7 types of literature. Now, why are there 7 types of literature? Well, because there's different love languages of people. And God knew that not all of you would receive love the same way. We have some folks here, like me, who are classical music people. If it happened after the 18th century, I probably don't know about it, okay? I'm serious. My music tastes are like really another century. And then I'm going to go way out on a limb here and say we might even have some people who think country music is music. I'm just saying. It could happen in some rooms I've been in, okay? I've been trying to embrace it. Apparently, a lot of people have lost their dog. I'm not really sure what the whole situation is, but I'm working on it. I'm trying to expand my horizons. At any rate, here's my point. Driving into church tomorrow morning, should the Lord tarry and give us another Sunday, driving into church, there will be people with half a dozen different radio stations playing as they drive in. Why? Because we don't all like the same stuff. And so God is going to communicate to us because he's a radical communicator. So what does he do? The number one thing he does, TNT doesn't know drama, God does. 54% of the Bible, according to Randy's unscientific cutting up of Bibles all over his apartment 25 years ago, is biography. When you think biography, think drama. Dun, dun. It's supposed to be this deep drama. You're supposed to feel it. So I teach 20-year-olds how to take apart dramas and show them that when you put together the life of someone, you start at the beginning with their birth. Let's say we'll go to the middle of chapter 11 in Genesis and pick up Abraham and tell his story to chapter 50, and we'll line it out with the field, and we'll break it in acts and scenes and episodes, and I try to tell it as drama. I was doing this in Central America a number of years ago, and I had a bunch of 16-year-old Mosquito Indians from along the Cocoa River. And I said to them, what is the book of Ruth about? And they're really actually very good. This generation is so good with drama. So one kid goes, it's a long shot. 2 women are walking beside a woman in the center as they come up the road, and then they're zooming in, and then you can hear them talking, And he goes through the whole thing. And I said, okay, what's the last scene of the story of Naomi, the drama? Well, there's a baby being wrapped and being placed in a manger, but behind it is so-and-so begot so-and-so, who begot so-and-so, who begot so-and-so, and it's scrolling by. And in the end, it's King David, and then even King Jesus. And I said, okay, what does the 4 chapters of Ruth mean? He said, well, I don't know, but here's what it looks like. It looks like Naomi lost her farm, lost her children. She lost pretty much everything. And then God refilled her hands. While she was worried about recovering the farm, God was recovering the world through her. And he said, here's the problem. She didn't live long enough to know why she lost what she lost. So I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, I think it means that when stuff happens to me and I can't figure it out, maybe I have to know that God has a bigger plan than I can see. And I said, you have done well. Drama. The second kind of literature is prescriptive epistle. Prescriptive epistle. You go to the doctor, you're having some problems, you sit down on the wax paper, and and you sit there and you're feeling like an idiot, in this half gown and half nothing. And you're sitting there trying not to have it blow open on you. And as you're talking to the doctor, they're saying, so what are you going through? And they're telling you, and they write a prescription. Here's what I know about a prescription. It absolutely does you no good whatsoever if you don't get it filled, right? How many of you got a prescription, paid a lot for the doctor, never got it filled? Okay, there are 3 sinners among us. Some of you are liars. That's for another session. But here's my point. When you're reading a prescriptive epistle, you're reading the answer to a problem, but you don't know the problem. So what I do is I reverse the narrative. 1 Corinthians. Here's the answers. What are the problems? And it's hilarious what 20-year-olds come back with as the problems. See, because the right answer to the wrong question is as bad as the wrong answer to the right one. So if you don't know the question, you're just guessing at what the answer means. Prescriptive epistles, when you study them, you reverse them to find out here's the answer, what's the problem? Then when you have that problem, that's where you'll go. And so we take a look at those, and I teach my way through those every year. The third kind of literature is a really tough one. It's called lamentation. Does anybody remember, they used to have those boxes of snacks called bugles. Does anybody remember these bugles? Okay. Well, okay, a lamentation's like a bugle, okay? Now, I know work with me here. It's going to be a little bit highbrow. A lamentation of the Bible's like a bugle snack, okay? Here's what it is. It'll start off with, God, you're not fair. People are doing wrong and getting away with murder, and you're doing nothing but sitting on your hands up there. Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 1. It's not true. It's not true. It's how he feels. And it starts off with this is what I'm feeling, and then God brings it down to the point. This is who I am. This is who I am. A lamentation expresses the real feelings of a person, but brings their feelings in line with God's truths. It's something desperately needed in 21st century America that believes feelings are more important than truth. There's a fourth type of literature. This is legal code and covenant treaty. Legal code and covenant treaty. Some people spell it L-A-W. Legal code and covenant treaty. It's basically the three types of law. And what we're going to do this afternoon is I want to break down law and then show you that there's an incredibly tough argument in the New Testament. It is the single biggest mistake that Christians make. Seriously. They misread Galatians. And they read the entire New Testament through a wrong reading of Galatians. And the summary of their reading is law bad, grace good. It's a study in how the law will just ruin you and how you should be able to live free from the law. Except for that's not at all what it's about. The book is a complicated argument about how atonement law was replaced by justification. And you can't even get to the argument if you're down here in the McNuggets version. And most Christians don't learn the law. So they think they understand Paul. Paul was a doctor in this stuff. When he's writing, he's up here. And they're down here going, law bad, grace good. And basically arguing for antinomianism. No rules. That's Outback. It's a great restaurant, but it has nothing to do with Galatians. Now, here's the thing. Legal code is about how God displayed his relationship with man. You didn't earn a relationship with God. It is not possible for the law to justify a man. It can abate God's wrath for a time, but it can't justify a man. And we'll come back and we're going to talk about that this afternoon. There's another section, and boy, this is the hardest single section I have with 20-year-olds, and I think maybe you'll understand this. The fifth type of literature is wisdom literature. And I have a hard time with 20-year-olds because they've never even paid a water bill once in their life in their own name. What wisdom can you have before you've ever even got billed for anything? I mean, really, when you get right down to it. So I'm pouring out my heart with Ecclesiastes and telling them their body's not going to work someday, and they're looking at me in their 20-year-old bodies going, yeah, sure. And I just say, honey, I was indestructible once too, but I'm going to tell you gravity's going to get us all, okay? That's just going to happen. So there's only so much plastic can do, and then you're kind of left for the ages. There's also poetics and poetry. I got to tell you, when you're talking about the Psalms and lyrics, some of my students love poetry, love the poetic portions. Some of them hate it. They want, give me a prescriptive epistle and tell me what to do. Knock off all this flowery stuff. And then the last one is prophecy or prophetic works. And prophecy isn't all about God telling you what's going to happen. It's about God's view of the news. Sometimes it's about what happened yesterday, but you missed it, and I missed it. Because what we saw wasn't what is. I want to remind you of something in the scriptures. And that is that we see the physical world 2.0 material world, but that's not the real world. That's the story. The real world is the eternal one. This ain't it. This stand, this stage, this building, this isn't it. All of this will be gone, but you'll still be you. All of this will be gone, but God will still be God. The problem is there are two cosmogonies. Naturalism says this is what's real, and it is the heart of the rebellion against God. Because this isn't what's real. Your body isn't what's real. You're not a body. You just live in one. And the problem is that biblically speaking, a world 1.0 that is watching a world 2.0 is not perceived by natural man. He sees only 2.0. Therefore, he must compost. Therefore, ecology is everything because this is all we've got. No, it isn't. Thank God it's not. Because you know what? It's beautiful. But am I the only person who feels like it's sinking? It's beautiful, but it's sinking. If my hope was in Washington, D.C. or Brussels, see, my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. And the reason that I can come back and feel the way I do is because God's word lays out a story. I have a writer that I like to read. I want to just pick up a passage of something that he said. I hope it touches you, and then I'm going to give you a chance for a question or two. He says, I have many memories about my father and about growing up with him in our apartment next to the elevated train tracks. For years, we listened to the roar of the train as it passed by. Late at night, my father waited alone for the train that took him to the factory where he worked the night shift. On this particular night, I waited with him in the dark to say goodbye. His face was grim. His youngest son had been drafted. I would be sworn in at 6 the next morning while he was in the factory. My father didn't want them to take his child, only 19 years old, to fight a war in Europe against people he had never seen. He placed his hands on my shoulders and he said, you be careful, son. If you need anything, write to me and I'll see that you get it. Suddenly, he heard the roar of the approaching train. He held me tightly in his arms, and he gently kissed me on his cheek. With tear-filled eyes, he murmured, I love you, my son. Then the train arrived. The doors closed him inside, and he disappeared into the night. And I left for boot camp. 1 month later, at age 46, my father died. I am now 76 as I sit and write this story. I once heard Pete Hamill, the New York reporter, say that memories are a man's greatest inheritance. I think I have to agree. I've lived through 4 invasions in World War II. I've had a life full of all kinds of experiences, but the only memory that lingers in my heart every day is the night my dad said, I love you, my son, and hugged me and disappeared into the mist. I tell you that story because when we're done talking about the critical ways in which you understand the scripture and all that it is, don't forget what it is. This is a message of a God who wants a relationship with you and loves you. And I don't know why, but he loves you so dramatically that there was nothing he wouldn't give in order to bring you into relationship with him, so he gave what was most precious to him as a symbol that there wasn't anything else that he was holding back. So when the mist clears, I want you to know this. You have a Father in heaven that is reaching out saying, I love you, son, daughter. And all of this technique of understanding the veracity of Scripture, if it doesn't leave you there, it left you in the wrong place. What a mystery it is that God would love me. How many of you know yourself to be sometimes really loving and sometimes like really not? Anybody else have those kind of hair days? morning breath and whatnot. You know, we all have that part that we cosmetically try to put back together. God is with me in the lowest moment and loves me the most. And that's hard for me to understand. Okay, so what questions do you have?